We have reached the end of the road of the 2025 Big Ten football season. It is Conference Championship Saturday, and it's 1 versus 2 in Indianapolis as the reigning national champs, number 1 Ohio State, take on number 2 Indiana in Indy for a Big Ten title and the number 1 overall seed in the second ever year of the 12-team college football playoff. We get you set for everything here on Big Ten Breakdown. I am Ben Stevens. Big Ten Breakdown, of course, all a part of the I-80 Club. If you are liking everything that we are doing here, if you want to get our latest content and coverage basically on a daily basis, make sure you are following, liking, and subscribing wherever you get your favorite shows, the podcast feeds, Apple, Spotify, etc. I hope you are watching on YouTube. And if you want all of this great content advertisement-free, it's patreon.com/I80 Club. That is patreon.com/I80 Club. It is our Big Ten title game, Big Ten breakdown, Conference Championship Saturday, the pregame show here on Big Ten Breakdown. We started this in August. We laid out the perspective for all 18 Big Ten schools entering the 2025 campaign, and we have reached the final game of our Big Ten football season. Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on Fox, the Big Ten title game between number 1 Ohio State and number 2 Indiana. Today's show, just so you have the rundown, how things are going to operate here, slightly different, of course, than our previous pregame shows when we had 6, 7, 8, heck, at times, even 9 Big Ten football games to break down. We do not have that at the moment. We only have one. We are going to talk about the Big Ten title game and give it the credit and respect that it deserves. We are going to talk about the stakes and the stage. We are going to break down the matchup, what each team presents for the other in this football game, and the key matchup that could dictate the outcome, and of course, its implications. Following Saturday night, the result for Sunday's reveal of the 12-team college football playoff and what it might mean beyond that for the individual accolades that come from each and every college football season in a Heisman Trophy race. At the end of the show, we'll also hit on the big news that has happened in the Big Ten Conference throughout this week. A slightly shorter show for you on a Friday morning to set the stage for your weekend, a conference championship weekend in the Big Ten. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. It is number 1 Ohio State and number 2 Indiana. A 4.5-point spread in favor of the Buckeyes. The total stands at 48.5. Kickoff around 7:30, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. And let's talk first about the stage. Number 1 versus number 2. It is our first non-college football playoff, 1 versus 2 nationally, since the 2022 season. It is our first 1 versus 2 within the Big Ten Conference since 2006. It is the first ever 1 versus 2 in a Big Ten championship game. Then, and for Indiana, it is IU's first berth in a Big Ten title game as well. Let's start with the Hoosiers component. Of course, the most miraculous, dramatic, and remarkable turnaround we have seen and probably will ever see in the history of this league or across the country in college football. The 2 years with Curt Cignetti in Bloomington. The fact that Indiana is playing in the first 1 versus 2 Big Ten football game in nearly 2 decades. And Indiana is the number 2 team in the nation competing for a Big Ten championship at stake on a Saturday in their backyard of Indianapolis. That is significant. It is the first Big Ten championship game for the Hoosiers. IU looking for its first Big Ten title of any kind since 1967. It would be the second outright Big Ten title for Indiana football, joining the 1945 campaign as well. Another historic mark, I should say, a notch in the belt of all of the accolades and records that Curt Cignetti has set in a 2-year window with IU. For Ohio State, very familiar territory. Saturday night will be the 14th ever Big Ten championship game contested. Ohio State has appeared in 7 of the 14. The Buckeyes have won 4 of their previous 6 appearances, including in a 4-year window from 2017 consecutively to 2020. But this is the first Big Ten title game for Ryan Day's Buckeyes since that COVID-shortened season of 2020. A victory then in Indianapolis against Northwestern. The winner of this game is going to be the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. Now, I understand what your argument might be to say, Ben, you laid out the stakes, you laid out the history, you laid out the stage for Saturday night in Indy, but its impact as in years previous is not necessarily the same. You're right. That's the 12-team era of the college football playoff. The loser of this game, by my math, as I was trying to get into the minds of the CFP selection committee, a very dangerous exercise to try to undertake. The loser probably at worst falls to number 4 and still has that double bye, or the opening round bye, I should say, in the college football playoff. They will know on Sunday, with an additional week of rest, what their outlook looks like through the CFP. There's a good chance that whoever wins this game is the number 1 seed. That is going to happen. Whoever loses this game, depending on what happens in the SEC title between Georgia and Alabama, the Big 12 championship game between Texas Tech and BYU, the loser of this game falls by a spot or 2 potentially to number 3, which would be a very favorable position to be in. We'll talk about the implications for the college football playoff at the end of this breakdown. And although the stakes and the impact and the significance perhaps on the greater national landscape of college football are not nearly as robust as they would have been about 4 or 5 years ago, I still ask you all to appreciate Saturday night inside Lucas Oil, because it is a grand setting that celebrates this conference. And this conference this year in 2025, trying to win a 3rd consecutive national championship, to make that statement as well, has a 1 versus 2 game for the first time anywhere in college football, non-college football playoff related, since 2022. That certainly means something. Now let's talk about the matchup itself. Number 1, Ohio State, undefeated. Number 2, Indiana, also undefeated. The only year in IU football history every game played was every game won. The Buckeyes have done that a time or 2. Line opened at 6.5 in favor of Ohio State. As we get closer to kick on Saturday evening inside Lucas Oil, that number is going to be around 4, currently at 4.5. It's a similar trend for the Hoosiers that we saw earlier in the year in the statement victory, perhaps the biggest win in the history of IU football on the road in Autzen against Oregon. That number opened at 9.5 or 10 in favor of the Ducks. Everybody and their mother ran to the window to bet on Oregon. Here's that upstart IU team again, but when they play teams, when they're booked as a dog, a step up in competition, they never rise to the occasion. We're going to see the same. And despite all the public money on Oregon as nearly a double-digit home favorite, a lot of the sharp, wise guy money was on Indiana. That line closed at a touchdown in favor of the Ducks, expecting Indiana to not just keep it a 1-possession game, but of course the Hoosiers ultimately winning that game outright. Only 3 games for IU in the 2 years under Curt Cignetti booked as an underdog. The only win, the only cover against Oregon on the road in October. Ohio State, being anything fewer than a touchdown favorite, has also been a rarity in the last 2 years. This will be game number 6 for Ryan Day's Bucks, booked as a 7-point favorite or fewer. In the previous 5, Ohio State both 4-1 straight up and against the number. The only loss in that span, ironically perhaps, on the road in Autzen against Oregon last year in the regular season. This is going to be a great football game because I think Indiana proved in the road win in Autzen they are not just some good story. They are not some remarkable turnaround where they can beat up on bad teams, but the superior teams based on brand or at least our expectation would roll them over. I think Indiana proved in that victory in Eugene against the Ducks, they are for real. Not just number 2 next to their name, but maybe the second best or the best team in all of college football. That is what Indiana possesses. That is what the mentality that has been instilled by Cignetti and his staff was on full display against Oregon in moments when it seemed they would crumble on the road at Iowa, on the road at Penn State. Indiana matched that level of expectation. It is what Ohio State has been doing for a very long time, but certainly this year as well. There is an idea behind the Buckeyes that, are they really that good? Are they really that elite? They've been rolling over everybody. They've been mowing down competition, but are they truly the number 1 team in the country looking the part of the reigning national champs and the national championship favorites? The answer to that, in my estimation, is of course a yes. Ohio State in the 12 regular season games allowed a total of 93 points, the first defense in FBS college football in a half century since the 1975 Florida Gators to not allow a single opponent in 12 regular season games to score 17 points or more. The most scored against the Buckeyes, Illinois. That was 16. The only team to put up more than 300 yards of total offense against Matt Patricia's defensive unit this year was Texas in the opener, and they had one late touchdown in what was otherwise not a very competitive offensive game for the Longhorns. Indiana is the only FBS program in college football that ranks top 5 nationally in scoring, in total offense, and scoring and total defense. IU, the second best scoring offense in the sport, averaging 44 points per game. And although Ohio State is the best scoring defense, who is the second best scoring defense, that would be IU, allowing 10.9 points per game as well. Both of these teams are elite in basically every single metric that you are going to find. Indiana, a little bit better on the ground, averaging 230 rushing yards per game, best in the Big Ten. Ohio State stifles that on the other side. The Buckeyes' ground game, of course, has evolved in the last month and a half with the emergence of the freshman Bo Jackson. He has had at least 75 rushing yards in 5 straight, 110 in 4 of those 5. Put that on full display with more than 150 total yards in Ann Arbor against the Wolverines. Roman Hemby was sensational against Purdue, more than 350 rushing yards for the Hoosiers and winning the Old Oaken Bucket for a second consecutive year. There is also the quarterback matchup, the individual, but of course what it will mean for the game's result. And beyond that in just a second. Julian Sayin has been unreal. A 78.9% completion percentage. Still the best currently in FBS history. 30 touchdowns to only 5 INTs this year. At least 303 passing yards for Sayin in 4 of the first 6 Big Ten games for the Buckeyes. He has had fewer than 240 in the last 3. Hasn't needed to do all that much and had 233 in the snow against the Maize and Blue last week. Fernando Mendoza has been very comfortable in the state of Indiana, specifically in Bloomington. 25 of the 32 touchdown tosses for IU's quarterback, the most in a single season for an Indiana QB ever, have come at home in the Rock. Fernando Mendoza has thrown an interception in 4 of 5 road games this year, the only one not last weekend against the Boilers in the Old Oaken Bucket game. Fernando Mendoza, unlike Julian Sayin, has only gone north of 300 yards once this season at home in Bloomington against Michigan State. Now, Fernando Mendoza has those Heisman-worthy moments, whether you agree on how he arrived in those spots, throwing a fourth-quarter interception with his team tied or trailing, then throwing the game-winning touchdown for IU, that remains to be seen. We'll talk more about the Heisman Trophy in just a matter of moments. As we continue here with our Big Ten championship game pregame show on Big Ten Breakdown, every week, every game, I try to highlight a key matchup so that you, as the football and Big Ten fan, can sound just maybe a little bit smarter with a little bit more tidbit of info among your friends and family over some beers watching a Big Ten football game of any kind every weekend. That is how we finish out the breakdown for our Big Ten breakdown game of the week, the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. The key to me in this game is going to be the red zone, because in the red area, both of these teams have been otherworldly. Both of these teams have accomplished something in the red zone this year that nobody else in the sport, nobody else at the FBS level has really even come close to. Both Indiana and Ohio State are the only 2 FBS teams to allow fewer than 10 red zone touchdowns this year. Indiana has given up a total of 5 red zone touchdowns. Ohio State only 7. We have seen the Buckeyes do that now year over year. We saw that against Michigan, despite trailing 6-zip, despite the early interception from Julian Sayin. It was that Buckeyes defense bowing up in the spots that matter most, only allowing field goals for Dominic Zvada. We have seen Indiana's defense do the same when it seemed as though they were going to lose, in danger of peril against Iowa. That defense bucked up. Penn State could have put the game away in State College. That defense bucked up against Oregon. They made Dante Moore throw multiple interceptions. the only game of which he has done that this year. Speaking of that matchup against the Ducks, just to solidify how elite IU's defense is, because Ohio State is worthy of being the best defense in the country. Indiana held Oregon at home in Autzen to only 267 total yards. That is still the fewest in the 4 years of the Dan Lanning era. So again, the key matchup to me is the red zone. You have the two FBS teams, the only two of 136 nationally this year, to allow their opponents 20 or fewer red zone trips, and the only two that have allowed fewer than 10 red zone touchdowns. So the ultimate then follow-up question is, the key matchup is red zone defense. Both are so stout there. Which offense is better? Which offense, if they even get inside the opponent's 20-yard line, can take advantage of what could be a very valuable scoring position come Saturday night in Indy? Indiana's offense slightly better in terms of red zone production. Both top 30 in scoring percentage, including made field goals. Indiana slightly better, top 15 at 92%. Even on offense, both of these teams in the red zone, 2 of 5 teams in the country this year with more than 60 red zone trips. So the only two that have allowed 20 red zone trips or fewer to the opposition, 2 of 5 that have gotten into the opponent's red zone more than 60 times this season. The key matchup to me is going to be that. The total is sub 50. Last year, this game stayed under in Columbus. Of course, in the game for Indiana against Oregon, that total stayed barely under. If you are keeping this game around 50, you are going to have not exactly the highest scoring affair. We are not expecting points after points after points. So can you take advantage of what are going to be highly valuable scoring opportunities in the red zone against two teams and two defenses that don't often allow you basically anything once you reach that red zone area? To me, that is the key. Who gets to the red zone first on offense? And if you even get inside the opponent's 20-yard line, are you settling for field goals, or can you convert with what might be a critical touchdown that, in my estimation, is going to decide the Big Ten champion come Saturday night in Indianapolis? If you are asking me for a pick, I think the betting market is telling us something. I really believe in this Indiana team, not just as a feel-good story like in 2024, but as one of the best in the country. Now, I have not seen anybody have offensive excellence or even offensive averageness against Ohio State's defense this year. It's a one-possession game. I'm going Indiana 21-17. I guess I lean to the under. No, let's go one-point game. 21-20 for the first 1 versus 2 matchup in the history of the Big Ten championship game. The first 1 versus 2 matchup in the Big Ten since 2006. The third ever 1 versus 2 of Big Ten football in the history of this league. That's how good our game is on Saturday. And I understand its implications. Our third tier of breaking down the Big Ten title game is not nearly as significant as it might have been years ago. The loser of this game is not going to miss the college football playoff. The winner of this game is not going to vault themselves into a bye when we were not expecting that to be the case. The winner of this game is going to be the number 1 team in the college football playoff, that top overall seed. The loser of this game, more than likely, is not just going to not miss the CFP. They're probably not falling out of the top 4 to earn that own opening round bye. So I understand it loses some of that drama perhaps, but the game itself should, and I believe will, deliver on those sky-high expectations. Now, implications, 1 versus 2, also the betting favorite to win a national championship, the reigning champions in Ohio State versus the team in Indiana that has the second best chance of winning a title. On Sunday, in our post-game show, following the Big Ten title game, not only will we react, that's a tongue twister, to what we saw on Saturday inside Lucas Oil, of course, we will put it into the perspective of the college football playoff. 3 teams from the Big Ten are getting into the CFP. It's just a matter of where they are in the seed line and where they find themselves in the bracket. Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. Those 3 teams are going to play in the college football playoff. Now, if you lose this game, either the Buckeyes or the Hoosiers, I don't think you fall past 4. To get into the mind of the selection committee and what they are going to be doing there in Grapevine, Texas this weekend, I'm not entirely sure. However, I do not believe these teams fall past 4, meaning they get that opening round bye. I do think if you fall to 4, let's say that Texas Tech and Georgia, both favorites. The Red Raiders a 12.5-point favorite in the Big 12 championship against BYU. Georgia a 2.5-point favorite against Alabama. They have not performed very well against Alabama, except for the 2021 national championship game. Let's say both favorites go chalk. Georgia wins, Texas Tech wins. Georgia moves up to 2. Texas Tech probably moves up to 3. The loser of Indiana and Ohio State falls to number 4. The danger of that would be your conference compatriot in Oregon, who I think will be that top at-large team. I guess it's not at-large, but that top number 5 seed not earning the opening round bye with a home playoff game in Autzen, basically dictating their path, which was the opposite happened to the Ducks when they were the number 1 overall seed in the first ever 12-team CFP and had the number 8 seed in Ohio State waiting for them in the Rose Bowl. That would be the danger, I think, if we get the chalk and either Ohio State or Indiana falls to 4, is looming in your first college football playoff game in the quarterfinal round, a very dangerous Oregon team. Ole Miss is not going to move up past Oregon. I don't think anybody moves up past Oregon right now. It would be if a Texas Tech and Georgia both lost during conference championship weekend, Oregon would have a shot to move in to the top 4 and earn an opening round bye. Outside of national championship implications, and of course, we'll set the stage with the CFP bracket on Sunday for your Monday morning recap of the weekend that was in the Big Ten on the postgame show. There is the individual race for the Heisman Trophy. Now, Diego Pavia has kind of vaulted himself, Vandy's quarterback, into the conversation. But the favorite entering conference championship Saturday in FBS college football is Indiana's Fernando Mendoza. He's about 15 cents in front of Pavia, who is about 25 cents in front of Ohio State's Julian Sayin. I have said now for quite some time, as it became rather apparent, it was probably a 2, if not now 3 quarterback race. The Big Ten title game between IU and Ohio State would also decide who wins the Heisman Trophy. You would have to just think naturally against these defenses. If you can make some sort of impact at the quarterback spot, you're going to change the course of the game. You might change the outcome of the game and deliver your team a victory. If you are doing that in a conference championship game to earn the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff, you are having more than likely a Heisman moment. Now, those in Columbus hate hearing about Fernando Mendoza throwing a 4th quarter interception in their 3 big road wins at Iowa, at Oregon, at Penn State, but also then tossing and showing some resilience to buy back in for a 4th quarter game-winning touchdown. They think he was the one to put them in that bad spot. Why should he get credit for digging himself out of the hole he put himself in? Whether you agree or not, it's a Heisman moment for the narrative award that is the Heisman Trophy. As a quarterback, having that ability to overcome adversity, always going to play. To lead Indiana to historic heights they have never seen in winning a Big Ten championship, winning a Big Ten championship game, their first Big Ten title outright since World War II, that's going to carry some water as well. Now, Julian Sayin, despite having better numbers than Fernando Mendoza, had not really had those Heisman-worthy performances or those Heisman highlight reel looking highlight montages, not performances. He had been balling out and putting up historic numbers this year, as we have detailed on this show. Julian Sayin started to find those Heisman-worthy moments last week in Ann Arbor against Michigan, responding from an 0-2 start with an interception deep in his own territory, with a 19 of 24 game for 233 and 3 touchdowns in the snow to snap the 4-game skid against Michigan. If he can deliver Ohio State their first Big Ten championship since 2020 because of his right arm and his stellar wide receiver cast, then again, you have the chance there for Julian Sayin to make his Heisman moment. So the implications of the Big Ten championship game, although the significance might vary slightly from what we have seen, the winner becomes the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. It is our first 1 versus 2 matchup in the Big Ten in nearly 2 decades. And the quarterback that more than likely leads his team to a victory is going to go to New York City the following Saturday night and probably hoist that Heisman Trophy high into the sky. That is what is at stake on Saturday in the Big Ten championship game. You are now ready for the Big Ten championship game on Saturday night in Indy. In the closing 2 minutes of this show, quickly, some big news around the Big Ten in the coaching carousel that we have seen. Let us start with perhaps the biggest story in college football this week, following the madness that we saw on Sunday in the SEC. Penn State's inability to hire a head coach. At the time of this recording, late on a Thursday afternoon, Penn State has yet to name a new head football coach. There is some speculation. The players and the donors in Happy Valley want the interim tag removed from Terry Smith. There is speculation that Pat Kraft wants something different. Again, in my estimation, I think Terry Smith is going to end up with the job. I'm not entirely sure where that leaves Penn State as a program. We saw, of course, what it did on National Signing Day for the Nittany Lions and their class to have 2 early signings, and that was it. And plummet because of all the flips that James Franklin had built in those relationships to bring those players to Blacksburg, Virginia. Not great. Not great for where Penn State is at this moment. Other news, UCLA hires JMU's head coach in Bob Chesney. Another guy that has had dramatic success in 2 years at James Madison is going to coach in the Big Ten. Bob Chesney has won at every single level. It is a very difficult undertaking to win currently with where the football program is for the Bruins in Westwood. If I was going to trust a guy that has won at D3, D2, FCS, and FBS levels, James Madison, heck, might be playing for the college football playoff come Sunday, I would trust in Bob Chesney at least being able to move the needle for UCLA football moving forward. As we shared on the weekend recap show for the regular season finale, Pat Fitzgerald in there as Michigan State's head coach. I'm a little bit worried, and I expressed that concern about the results in the final 3 full seasons as Northwestern's head coach. But there is no doubt that Fitz understands this conference and is a winning football coach and should be highlighted as such as well. And there is no doubt that in his opening week on the job in East Lansing, he has won a ton of favor, and he feels like he can be a guy at least to build a proud football program for MSU back up once again. And then finally, a couple of coordinator changes for Oregon. Will Stein, new head coach at Kentucky. Tosh Lupoi, the former Cal Berkeley Bear, heading back to Berkeley, California to become the new head football coach for Cal. Both are going to stay on with Dan Lanning throughout the college football playoff for Oregon. Both, I think, are built to have great success at other stops. Being the OC at Oregon has led to some pretty successful runs as being a head coach. Ask Kenny Dillingham, ask Scott Frost, at least in the first stint at UCF, and I think Tosh Lupoi is going to do the same. And finally, Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline, a new head coach at USF. He is the best recruiter in college football. He goes to the recruiting hotbed that is South Florida. USF has some of the best resources in the American. I expect Brian Hartline, maybe next year, maybe the year following, to win an American championship for the Bulls in Tampa because of what he can do both as a recruiter and as a coach for USF. That will do it here for our Big Ten Breakdown show, getting you ready for Conference Championship Saturday in the Big Ten. Enjoy Saturday night because the significance in the stage is still there, even if the implications dwindle ever so slightly as compared to years past. It is the first number 1 versus number 2 game in the history of the Big Ten championship game. It is the first number 1 versus number 2 game in the Big Ten Conference in nearly 2 decades, since 2006. I'm Ben Stevens. We'll recap it all at the end of the weekend and get you set with the 12-team college football playoff, other bowl games, and its outlook for every Big Ten member institution that will play in the postseason. That is coming your way following the weekend. Once again, you are now ready for the Big Ten title game on Saturday night in Indianapolis. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Indiana. Thanks for being here, as always, on Big Ten Breakdown.